Many meetings. She's the fastest person I've ever met. She's pretty cut and dry, and if you don't raise your hand instantly, you're out to lunch, because you're not going to get a chance till the next month. Well, they're back, and we're thrilled. I thought perhaps Doris Jones, that would be Steve's wife, would get a kick out of the fact that we're small and we're rural, but we still are the best small rural school district in the state of New York. And so in this newspaper, we have community news and events. And on the back, it reads as follows. The Fabius Historical Society will meet on Monday, July 1st at 7 a.m. Oh, let's put that p.m. And it does say for a rousing musical program of the 20th century American composers. We are pleased to welcome back Steve Jones, bass baritone, and Marina Gorelaya. Am I saying that right? If I'm not, I apologize. I've tried 3 or 4 different ways. And she is an amazing pianist. So we're going to meet them in just a few moments and take advantage of listening to this excellent music. We have everything from George Gershwin to listen to, Leonard Bernstein, Jerome Kern, Cole Porter, Jimmy Van Heusen, and who knows what else Steve has in his little repertoire of the information on our sheet. They were extremely enjoyable, and you will find this an entertaining and wonderful time spent together. We invite you following the program to come right out through the doors that you see behind me, and you're in for a wonderful time of refreshments and hopefully some cool drink of some kind. Without delaying this program any longer, let's bring Steve and Marina right out.
Well, thank you very, very much for coming out on this kind of wet, really crummy night, right? I certainly appreciate it. We have a real big program today. It's bigger than I expected it to be, so we have a lot of good information to cover. All of the information that you see on the text slides, and I had to make a call on this, all the information on all the slides is available in the back of the room. So if you want any of all this text, and I would appreciate it if everyone would take one. We went out and made 35 copies, and we thought for each family that would be terrific. A lot of good information on a lot of people of whom you may or may not have any familiarity with. Last year, we did a whole program on Copeland, Aaron Copland, as you may remember. And the point of that was, I said, can you name 5 German composers? And of course, we all could name 5 German composers. And I said, could you name 5 Italian composers? And everyone said, well, of course. And all the hands went up, we named 5 Italian composers. I said, how about 5 Russian composers? And all the hands go up. I said, what about 5 American composers? I looked around and somebody said, John Williams. So it's just amazing to me that, in fact, that we didn't have more experience than, well, the dean of American composers is of course, Aaron Copland. However, I've put together a group of composers here tonight. There's actually 7 of them, and some lyricists as well. And they've contributed to a very large portion of the music in this country from about, 1920 up to, well, right up to 1990. So for most of the 20th century. And I'd like to get started. This is what we're covering, some 20th century American composers. And we have 7 of them, and they are as follows. Paul Bowles, really interesting guy we'll talk about in a minute. Of course, Leonard Bernstein, George Gershwin, Jerome Kern, Irving Fine, Cole Porter, and a local boy, Jimmy Van Heusen. Most composers that write songs do so with the help of a lyricist. And actually, Tennessee Williams was not a lyricist. He was a playwright, as you know. but he also wrote a lot of poems, and he provided texts, and we won't even call them poems. He provided some text to Paul Bowles, and as we go ahead here, Paul Bowles was an interesting guy on his own because he wasn't first known as a musician. We know that Paul Bowles was first. Well, Paul Bowles was first an author, and he's an expatriate, which is really interesting. He lived most of his life. He was born in New York City, and he went to the University of Virginia, and he studied music with Aaron Copland, and he wrote music for over 25 theater productions. However, his critical success was in 1949. That was during the Truman administration. It was the year I was born. And he wrote a book called The Sheltering Sky. It was a tremendous hit. And he lived with his wife, as it says, he lived with his wife, Jane, in Tangier, Morocco, for 52 years, except in the winter. He was a snowbird as well. And he owned an island off the coast of Sri Lanka, which used to be called Ceylon. And he spent most of his time there. Now, Bowles was a close friend, as I said, of Tennessee Williams, and he wrote incidental music for many of Tennessee Williams' famous plays. Tennessee Williams was said to be one of America's greatest playwrights. He wrote 25 full-length plays and over 70 one-act plays, and he wrote dozens of short stories and poems. He was a native of rural Mississippi. His grandfather was an Episcopal minister. You'd never know that if you knew the plays of Tennessee Williams. But his father was a gruff alcoholic, kind of what they call an on-the-road or over-the-road salesman. However, his mother was described as just the perfect Southern belle. He was educated at 3 different universities and graduated in 1938 from the University of Iowa. Lots of influences, all the influences you can think of a great playwright would probably have. And we see Shakespeare probably wasn't a bad model for most of his works. And his 5 greatest plays, it is said to be, if you type in Google and go 5 greatest plays of Tennessee Williams, there's the list that you get in reverse order. The Rose Tattoo, The Night of the Iguana, many of us may remember the movie. The Glass Menagerie, The Streetcar Named Desire, and A Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. And all of those plays, in fact, were made into movies. Tennessee Williams, most unfortunately, died in New York City, 1938, of a drug and alcohol overdose at the age of 71. So he could have accomplished much more, but we'll see more than that. Oh, this is my favorite slide. That was the island that Paul Bowles owned off the southern coast of Ceylon, called Taprobane Island. And I thought, what a nice place to spend the winter. It's about 2.5 acres, and I don't know what it would be valued at today, but he bought it a long time ago. So, the first piece, or the work piece where we're going to perform for you tonight, is by Paul Bowles, and it's called the Blue Mountain Ballads. And these are special little pieces. They're short, there's 4 of them, and they each depict an aspect of Southern living in rural Southern America early and in the mid-20th century. So we're going to go right ahead. They are Heavenly Grass, Lonesome Inn, Cabin, and Sugar in the Cane.
door all day, but nobody ever stops my way. Nobody ever stops my way. My teeth jaw on an old and bone, and I do the dishes all alone. I do the dishes all by my own. My feet clomp clomp on the hardwood floor, 'cause I won't buy love at the hardware store. I don't want love from the mercantile store. Now my feet are caught by my single bed, while the moon beams down on my sleepless head. While the moon grins down at an old fool's head. The cabin was cozy and hollyhocks grew right by the door till his whisper crept through. The sun on the sill was yellow and warm till she lifted the latch for a man or a storm. Now the cabin falls to the winter wind, and the walls cave in where they kissed and sinned. Now the long white rain sleeps cleaning the room like a white-haired witch with a long straw broom. I'm red pepper in a shaker, red that's waiting for the baker. I'm sweet sugar in the cane, never touched except by rain. If you touch me, God save you, these summer days are hot and blue. I'm potatoes not yet mashed. I'm a check that ain't been cashed. I'm a window with a blind, can't see what goes on behind. If you did, then God save you, these winter nights are blue and cold. Our next composer shouldn't need to be introduced to everyone, but there's some interesting things that I came up with, and that will be George Gershwin. Now, George Gershwin's father was named Moishe Gershowitz, and his mother was Rosa Bruskin, and they both emigrated, but separately, from the Odessa in the Ukraine to St. Petersburg. They met in New York and were married back in 1895. George studied composition in Paris, with a really, really famous composition instructor. Her name was Nadia Boulanger. And there are so many people, so many, Aaron Copland, Burt Bacharach, Quincy, the great jazz Quincy Jones, Michel Legrand, the resident composer at Cornell and Ithaca College for 30 years, Karel Husa studied with her, as did Arthur Frackenpole at SUNY Potsdam at the Crane School of Music. Gershwin's style is a melding of classical music and popular music along with jazz. His most famous orchestra piece, I'm sure, the first piece I ever heard that really grabbed me was, of course, Rhapsody in Blue. I was a clarinetist, and Rhapsody in Blue starts with this, and it just, there's that glissando. I'd never heard of that being done on a clarinet, so that's, I must have been 10 years old, so it was wonderful. American in Paris, we all remember the great movie of Leslie Caron. And then, of course, the opera Porgy and Bess. He wrote a lot of music for Broadway and just other songs, and he used his brother, a guy named Buddy DeSilva, as famous as their lyricist. I thought this was cute. His first paid piece, he got $5 for it, which $5 back in the 1910s or 20s was probably a ton of money. But the title was, When You Want 'Em, You Can't Have 'Em, and When You Got 'Em, You Don't Want 'Em. So, and his first national hit, we all know, this was Swanee. Swanee, da, da, da. And of course that was made famous by Al Jolson. Gershwin's music, the first musical of Thee I Sing, was the first musical to ever win a Pulitzer Prize. In 1937, he won the Academy Award, and for Best Original Song, Oh, they can't take that away from me. Oh, they can't take that. Great stuff. Gershwin also wrote about 20 solo works for piano. He's on is probably his most famous with the 3 preludes written in 1926 and in 27. And back then, a lot of guys would just get together, like in a hotel or something, and had a piano, and they would premiere new works there, and they'd ask, well, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? And so these pieces, as opposed to being premiered at Carnegie Hall or someplace, they were premiered at the Roosevelt Hotel, which I thought that was just really interesting to me. The saddest thing, and I didn't know this, that George Gershwin died of a brain tumor in 1937. He was only 38 years old. We think about what we accomplished in our lives, and when Mozart was my age, he'd been dead for 32 years already. So, I mean, it's just amazing what these people could do if they were here. There's a very, very famous orchestra conductor, Austrian orchestra conductor named Otto Klemperer. And he had a famous brother as well, but famous in a different way. And you can read here that Klemperer orchestrated the second movement of this and used it as his memorial service. And you'll see why it's so appropriate. It's called Blue Lullaby. But I wanted to mention his brother. His brother's name was Werner Klemperer. Does that ring a bell with anyone? Werner Klemperer? Almost. That was, it was on Hogan's Heroes, and it was Colonel Klink. Yeah, Colonel Klink, and Hogan's Heroes was this guy's brother. So, so that was that. Marina, this is a piano solo. I'm going to put the piano up. Yes, and the 3 preludes, the first one is untitled, as you'll see. The second one is called Blue Lullaby, as it says in your program. And the third one is called Spanish Prelude. So I will turn this over to Marina. Tennessee Williams, and George Gershwin. We're now moving ahead to probably the least known and maybe the most, well, little esoteric composer. His name is Irving Fine, and Irving Fine is from Boston, and he was one of 6 composers known as the Boston School. And those other composers are, I'll tell up here in a moment, Arthur Berger, Leonard Bernstein, Aaron Copland, Lucas Foss. Some of you, if anyone's here from the western part of New York State, you may know Lucas Foss. He was conductor of the Buffalo Philharmonic from 1963 to 1970 in Harold Shapiro. He was a Harvard graduate and studied conducting with Sergei Koussevitzky, who conducted the Boston Symphony for 25 years. He was also the pianist for the Boston Symphony, and again, he studied too with Nadia Boulanger in Paris, taught music theory at Brandeis, very, very close friends with Bernstein, Copland, and Stravinsky. He was also the composition teacher at the Tanglewood Festival for 11 years, and he died of heart disease at age 48. His music, which is amazingly young, his music assimilates several different types of music. And this was interesting. It says Aaron Copland and Virgil Thompson, another composer, referred to Fine's music as having unusual melodic grace. I will tell you, these 2 pieces I'm going to sing have no melodic grace whatsoever. And other composers use such words as witty, clever, humorous to describe his style. I will agree with that entirely. He was the director of the Harvard Glee Club, wrote lots of music for chorus. In fact, I was introduced to, I have a very good friend of mine, a lifelong friend virtually in the audience tonight, and he was our fraternity choir director when I went to Ithaca College, and he introduced me to Irving Fine. So I'm kind of sending this one back to you, kid. And so we did these pieces called McCord's Menagerie, and one is about a clam, and I frankly forget the other ones, but he also wrote choral arrangements, though, of all of the Copland songs that I sang last year. All of those songs that were for solo voice and piano, he rewrote them all for choirs, and they're sung all over the country today, in high schools, settings, and colleges, everywhere. The piece I'm going to sing is actually 6 pieces. I'm going to sing 2 of them, the first one and the last of the first set of the 2 sets. But anyway, it's called A Childhood Fable for Grown-Ups. They're written on the verses of Gertrude Norman. Well, who was Gertrude Norman? No one knows Gertrude Norman, except we probably remember the story of Johnny Appleseed. Gertrude Norman wrote Johnny Appleseed. Johnny Appleseed was actually fashioned after a real guy named John Chapman. The childhood fables were written in 2 sets of songs, 4 in the first set, 2 in the second set. The first set of 4 composition work for the 50th anniversary of the Juilliard School of Music. And the second set was added to make the whole thing longer a couple of years later. So you're going to see that Irving Fine's music is probably not referred to as melodically graceful. First one is called Polar Roller. Polar rolling the polar bear, he finds the cold so nice. He loves to roll in the deepest snow and play on a heap of ice. In ice water he loves to swim and splish and splash and splash and hush the cold snow under him and snuggle in the slush. His favorite dish is frozen fish with icicles and spicicles and other little icicles, and that's his favorite dish. long famous snake. The snake began to shake. He didn't know which way first to run. Here, said the frog, you may think I'm a frog, but I'm really not. I'm a gollywog. And if a gollywog gets eaten by a snake, that snake will die of a tummy ache. Oh goodness, said the snake, what a terrible mistake. And he shivered away, did run. Well, the frog said they're smiling and laughing and beaming, laughing and beaming, smiling and beaming, smiling and beaming in the soft summer sun. So that's Irving 5. Moving on, our next composer doesn't need much of an introduction, but there are a couple of interesting things. I'm going to kind of collapse a lot of this information for us. As I said, there's a set of these notes for everybody in the back. Please take them on your way out, because I don't know what I'll do with them. We don't have a fireplace anymore, so. Leonard Bernstein was the son of Ukrainian Jewish parents, and this was interesting. He was the first world-acclaimed conductor to ever be born and educated here in the United States. The first one in 200 plus years. However, he did a lot of other things. He was an author, composer, lecturer, pianist, social activist, and philanthropist. He became music director of the New York Philharmonic, succeeding some really famous people. I'm sure many of us here have heard of Toscanini and Leopold Stokowski, the man who did all the orchestra music for the movies Fantasia. Bruno Walter and Dmitri Mitropoulos. Well, here is the thing that made Bernstein famous. Bruno Walter was conducting the New York Phil, and they're doing a very, very difficult program, including this Richard Strauss piece called Don Quixote. And Bruno Walter got sick. And without a single rehearsal, Bernstein stepped in, took his place, led the concert. It was a tremendous, tremendous success. No one could believe what a wonderful job he did. Made the front page. Almost never happens, made the front page of the New York Times the next morning, and he was therefore world famous at age 25. Just amazing to me. You may remember when you were children, I certainly do, sitting in front of the television on a Sunday evening, right after, typically after it was in the afternoon, and listen to the young people's concerts. And they were annotated concerts, where he would explain all of the music first, and do Carnival of the Animals, and Peter the Wolf, and lots of other pieces. This amazed me, because remember, we're talking here just a couple of years before the Cuban Missile Crisis. And Bernstein was the instigator who took the New York Philharmonic to the USSR, and they performed a Russian piece in Russia by a US orchestra, and it was Shostakovich's Symphony No. 5, a daunting but absolutely phenomenal work. And at its conclusion, Shostakovich came up on the stage, congratulated the musicians, and congratulated Bernstein, gave him a big embrace on the stage in Moscow at the height of the Cold War. I sometimes wonder if only we could let some of these people solve some of our other problems, you know. So, as a composer, as most of these composers are, we're mostly influenced, highly influenced by Copland, and again he uses jazz rhythms, and that's all. He wrote tons of music. We'll go on to the next slide. Oh, that's an iconic picture of Lenny, affectionately known as. And we can move ahead through that as well. Because of all the different kinds of music Leonard Bernstein wrote, there is one type that he liked more than all of the others. I mean, this guy wrote ballets, operas, symphonies, film scores, chamber music, piano, solos, choral music, did all this kind of stuff. But the one thing he liked the most was his musical theater work. He loved writing for the musical theater. He received 9 Grammy Awards and tons of other awards, 2 Tonys. The musical from which we're going to sing and play for you shortly, Wonderful Town, was written in 1953. It won the award that year for Best Musical. 1958, his musical West Side Story was nominated for the best musical, but it lost. Anyone know what it lost to? Other than Irwin? It lost to Meredith Willson's The Music Man. And The Music Man was a great show, but from a musician standpoint, when I put those two shows like this, it can't compare to West Side Story, but that's my opinion. In writing Wonderful Town, Bernstein collaborated with two of the greatest lyricists, the great lyricist team of Comden and Green. That's Betty Comden and Adolph Green. We do not hear very much about female lyricists, and certainly Betty Green or Betty Comden and Green just did amazing things. In fact, as it says, between 1953 and 91, they were nominated for 12 Tony Awards, won 7. And they won them for Best Musical, Best Book, Best Original Score, Best Composer, and Lyricist. Wonderful Town is a really, really cute show. It's based on a 1940 play called My Sister Eileen. Real simple. Two young girls from Ohio decide they're going to go to New York and conquer the world, conquer New York City, and find love all at the same time. Well, it didn't quite work out for them that way. And we'll talk a little about that as we go along as I set up the songs. The first thing we're going to do, though, here is hear a medley. And this is sort of interesting. There's 5 pieces in this medley that Marina is going to play solo. The first one you'll hear is entitled Swing. The second one has a real catchy name. It's called Ohio. Yeah, but the words go, mio, my, why did we ever leave Ohio? I mean, really, really interesting. The third one is called My Darling Eileen. The fourth, It's Love. And I have to tell you this, that the last piece she plays is called, are we ready? It's called The Wrong Note Rag. Now, Marina was playing this once locally, and afterwards somebody came up to her and said that everything was great except the pianist played too many wrong notes. And they didn't know the title of it, and I had to slap myself in the head and say, well, wait a second, it's called The Wrong Note Rag. So.
Just one thing. It happened not to me. It happened to conductor because we played with orchestra, and somebody said to conductor, what a great job orchestra did, but there were some wrong notes. I said, yeah, I suppose.
Oh, thank you so much. So, without further ado, a medley from Wonderful Town. So these two sisters come to New York looking for love, and as fate would have it, one of them is more, let's say, pulchritudinously endowed than the other. And she goes off and has no problems meeting people whatsoever, and she's an actress. The older sister is a writer, and she's trying to sell her stuff to short story magazines, and is having a heck of a time. No one wants to listen to her or anything. So she goes in and she meets this guy named Bob Baker, and she leaves 3 stories with him in hopes that maybe she'll read them and get back to her. He'll read them and get back to her. Well, he does, but he's really not interested in publishing her stories. He's interested in other kinds of things. So, but in the very first production, I thought this was really interesting. These are just little things that hit me. George Gaines was the original Bob Baker. Does that face look familiar to anyone? Does anyone remember the television series? You might have had children, grandchildren, and you watched it yourselves, called Punky Brewster. Yeah. This was Punky Brewster's dad. And if anyone watched the lowbrow comedy series Police Academy, he was in all the Police Academy movies. So, and these are slides from various productions. So what happens is, Ruth goes and talks to Bob Baker, and Bob Baker says, go home. Go home. You know, you're trying to compete in New York City. You're from some little town out in Ohio called Columbus. Who've ever heard of it? And, except Procter & Gamble people. So anyway, this is what his song is. He's telling him to go back. Go home, go west, go back where you came from. Oh, why did you ever leave Ohio? A million kids just like you come to town every day with stars in their eyes. They're gonna come to the city. They're gonna grab off the Pulitzer Prize. But it's a terrible pity because they're in for a bitter surprise. And their stories all follow one line, like his, like hers, like mine. Born in Duluth, natural writer, published in 7, genius type, wrote school play, wrote school paper, summa cum laude, all of that tribe. Came to New York, got on the staff here, this was my chance to be heard. Well, since then I haven't written a word. What a waste, what a waste, what a waste of money and time. Man from Detroit, wonderful artist, went to Picasso, Pablo said, wow, settled in France, bought him a beret, lived in Montmartre, really learned how, came to New York, read an exhibit, art critics made a big fuss, now he paints those toothpaste cans on the bus. What a waste, what a waste, what a waste of money and time. Girl from Mobile, versatile actress, tragic or comic, any old play. Suffered and starved, met Stanislavski, he said the world would cheer someday. Came to New York, repertoire ready, Chekhov's and Shakespeare's and Wilde's. Now they watch him flipping flapjacks and childs. What a waste, what a waste, what a waste of money and time. Kid from Cape Cod, fisherman's family, marvelous singer, big baritone, rented his boat, paid for his lessons, starved for his studies, down to the bone. Came to New York, aimed at the opera, sing the Rigoletto, his bitch. At the Fulton Market, now he yells fish. What a waste of money and go home, go west, go back where you came from. Go home. Well, Ruth and Eileen rented this basement apartment, and under them there's dynamiting going on for a new subway line. And they can't get any sleep whatsoever. And over them, they have this old American League football player. And he lives upstairs, and he's living there with his girlfriend. But the girlfriend's mother's coming, and the girlfriend's mother doesn't know that they're living together. So they want to see whether he'll live downstairs with the two girls, and they'll stow him away. Well, this guy has seen the better side. He's been hit in the head too many times with a football, for sure. And this is called Pass the Football. Look at me now, 4 years of college, famous professors tutoring me, scholarship kid, everything paid for, food and vacations, all of it free. Day that I left, everyone gathered, their cheering still rings in my ears. Ray, rec, rah, rah, rec, ray, rah, rec, rec, rah, rah, rec, rec. W-E-C-R-E-K. R-E-Q. No. Rec, we love you because I passed that football like nothing you had ever seen. Couldn't spell a lick, couldn't do arithmetic, 1 and 1 made 3. Thought the dog was skinty, but I could pass that football like nothing you had ever seen. Couldn't write my name, couldn't translate Jefferson, never learned to read Mother Goose or Andre Gide, but I could pass that football like nothing you had ever seen. Couldn't figure riddles, puzzles made me doubt. Where the hell was Moses when the lights went out? I never even tell red from green, get those verbs through my beat, but I was buddies with the dean like nothing you had ever seen. Passed without a fuss, English, lit, and calculus, never had to cram, even passed the bar exam, because I could pass the football like nothing you had ever seen. Couldn't dance for beans, mashed my girls to smithereens, sometimes blood would spill, still my heart was always filled, because I could pass the football like nothing you had ever seen. Then there was the week Albert Einstein came to speak relativity. Guess who introduced him? Me. Because I could pass the football like nothing you had ever seen. Had no table manners, used to dump my bowl, always drunk the water from the finger bowl. Though I was not good up for any shield, Rexy's mom, age 93, got up and gave her seat to me like nothing you had ever seen. In our Hall of Fame, there's a statue with my name. There we stood by heck, Lincoln, Washington, and Bragg. Because I passed that football like nothing you had ever seen. Well, I can take my coat off for that. 3 more songs, 3 more composers. Thank you, Leonard. Yeah. Our next composer, his name is Jerome Kern, and he is seminal in the development of musical theater. He changed musical theater because before Jerome Kern, musical theater mostly was a frivolity. The songs were put out there purely for entertainment. They didn't necessarily connect with the show at all. this was this guy singing and that guy dancing and this girl's doing their things, and it was just an entertainment for an evening, more like a variety show. But Jerome Kern thought the music in a show should in fact connect to the show. And it says he wrote over 700 songs. He used over 100 different stage works. 100 different stage shows. That's an amazing number. Some of his most iconic songs are Old Man River, Can't Help Loving That Man, A Fine Romance, Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, All the Things You Are, and The Way You Look Tonight. He used several lyricists, besides Ira Gershwin and Johnny Mercer. He spent most of his career, as it'll say in a second, with Oscar Hammerstein II. He was a native New Yorker, created dozens of Broadway musicals, Hollywood films, and a career that lasted over 4 decades. This is important because his career almost ended very, very, very early. Not altogether differently than the fact that George Gershwin died when he was 38. In addition to his enormous output, as I mentioned before, his greatest innovation was actually integrating the songs, using the songs to develop the characters, and this became the model for every musical after that. Most of his musicals are unheard of today. The only one that's regularly revived, of course, is Showboat. Now this was sort of interesting, but we'll get to this. He wrote for the Ziegfeld Follies for 20-some years. But here it is. In 1950, at the age of 30, he was scheduled, had his tickets ready to go on the May 1st voyage of the RMS Lusitania in 1915. But however, Kern missed the boat. That old expression, he missed the boat. Well, he did. He was up late at night gambling and playing poker with his buddies, and he was sleeping it off the next morning when the boat left. Well, 7 days later, of course, the boat was torpedoed by German submarines 11 miles off the Irish coast, and that is one of the major things, of course, that drew us into World War I. However, in addition to that, as you can see, that there are 1,200 people, most of whom were Americans, perished on that sinking of that ship. Just a quick slide of Jerome Kern with Oscar Hammerstein. I was surprised to see the age difference between the two of them in doing some research on this. As I mentioned, he read Edna Ferber's novel Showboat and immediately made it into a musical version. Now this was interesting because it was made into, after the musical version, it was made into 3 movies. Now remember, he wrote a musical, right? The first movie it was made into was a silent film. Just amazing to me. Obviously it was done, I'm sure, with the organist in the theater or the pianist in the theater. It was later released in black and white, and in 1951, as it says, emerged in glorious Technicolor. His Broadway show, his last show, which he wrote in 1939, was called A Very Warm for May. The show failed. It lasted, 59 performances? However, one of the great, great American iconic songs came out of this, one of my favorite songs. And the name of the song is All the Things You Are. This song has been recorded over 50 times by all kinds of people. In fact, I didn't even know all these people were singers. There's the list. Peter Sellers, the Pink Panther, Michael Jackson, Keith Jarrett, and of course the ones you'd expect like Sinatra and Jack Jones and Mary Alonso. So I hope you enjoyed this. This is All the Things You Are by Jerome Kern. It is almost never done. And looking at recordings of this, I only found 2 that ever used the introduction. I'm going to sing that introduction tonight. So out of 50 recordings, I didn't listen to 50, but maybe 30. The introduction was only used twice. Again I long for adventure, something to make my Finding your love, I found my adventure. Touching your hand, my heart beat the faster. All that I want in all of this world is you. You are the promised kiss of springtime that makes the lonely winter seem warm. You are the breathless hush of evening that trembles on the brink of a lovely song. You are the angel glow that lights a star. The dearest things I know are what you are. Someday my happy arms will hold you, and someday I'll know that moment divine when all the things you are mine. That was difficult. Cole Porter, the great, great Cole Porter, who was born in Peru, Indiana, he had both the privilege and the torment of being the grandson of the wealthiest man in Indiana, who was an oil and timber speculator. His grandfather sent him to Yale to be a lawyer, because that's where presidents come from, as we know. However, he majored in English and music instead. He went to France, and it was reported that he served in the French Foreign Legion during the First World War. In 1919, he married Linda Lee Thomas. She was a divorcee, 8 years his senior. I think that was quite odd back then. Linda Lee was never in doubt, though, however, regarding Cole's lifestyle orientation. The marriage gave her continued social status because he was a famous songwriter, and it provided Cole with a respectable front in a time when being gay was not even acknowledged publicly. They remained married until his wife died in 1954, and the 1930s were probably Cole Porter's most productive years. 1932, he wrote Night and Day. 1934, he had at least 4 big hits. Anything Goes, the Broadway musical, was playing over at Merry-Go-Round last year. Blow Gabriel Blow, I Get a Kick Out of You. You're at the Top. 1935, he wrote Begin the Begin, and It's Just One of Those Things. 1936, The Lovely, which is, by the way, they made a biographical movie of Cole Porter about 5 years ago, I'm going to guess, and it was entitled The Lovely. You'd be so easy to love, and I've Got You Under My Skin, In the Still of the Night. 1938, My Heart Belongs to Daddy. 1937, Cole Porter's life effectively, and he thought anyway, came to an end. He was in a horse riding accident. Both of his legs were crushed, never to walk again. He was crippled for the rest of his life, which means from 1937 until 1964, almost 30 years, he was crippled. He entered a period of severe depression, was in constant pain, and he believed his career was over, and he was living every day with that. He composed some scores for Hollywood movies and several Broadway shows. The critics panned them because they didn't seem to have any big hit tunes. Finally, in 1948, his friends got together and said, come on, one more time, we'll see what you can give us. Well, he took a look at famous Shakespeare work called The Taming of the Shrew. from that was the Broadway musical Kiss Me Kate. It was a tremendous hit. It won the Tony Award for Best Score and Best Musical. It was lasted over 1,000 performances. And yet, when you talk to people about Cole Porter, one of the first things they will tell you is the big song that they always remember is Night and Day. So we shall do that here. It was originally in a movie called, or in a stage show called Gay Divorce. This is what's interesting to me, the difference between the 1930s and today. Because it was called Gay Divorce. They made a movie the next year called The Gay Divorcee, but it has nothing to do, obviously, with that type of orientation. It was an entirely different thing. It starred Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. A couple of things about this as we go forward. Fred Astaire was 35 years old when he made this movie. Ginger Rogers was 24. We always give Fred Astaire all the big accolades, all his wonderful dancing and so on. But you got to remember, Ginger Rogers, who was 11 years his younger, had to do everything he did, except she had to do it backwards and in 6-inch heels. So, I mean, that's just a pretty amazing thing. So, one of our favorite Cole Porter songs, Night and Day. Excuse me. Like the beat, beat, beat of the tom-tom when the jungle shadows fall. Like the tick, tick, tock of the stately clock as it stands against the wall. Like the drip, drip, drip of the raindrops when the summer shower is through. So a voice within me keeps repeating you, night and day. You are the one, only you beneath the moon and under the sun. Whether near to me or far, it's no matter, darling, where you are, I think of you. Night and day, day and night, why is it so that this longing for you follows wherever I go? In the roaring traffic boom, in the silence of my lonely room, I think of you. Night and day, under the heart of me, there's such a hungry yearning burning inside of me, and this torment won't be through till you let me spend my life making love to you, day and night, night and day. Night and day, under the heart of me, there's such a hungry yearning burning inside of me, and this torment won't be through till you let me spend my life making love to you, day and night, night and day. Finally, our local boy, Jimmy Van Heusen. However, that wasn't his name. His name was, and if I had a name like this, I'd change it too, probably. It was Edward Chester Babcock. He was born January 26, 1913, in Syracuse, New York. began writing music while he was at Syracuse Central High School, which was at the corner of South Adams and Warren Street. Any people remember that? Okay. At 16, however, he was doing local shows and so on, and he wanted to change his name because he didn't like constantly being pulled over and saying, hey, aren't you this, aren't you? So he changed his name to Jimmy Van Heusen, after the famous Phillips Van Heusen shirt makers. What they said was, the story was, is that as he would sit in the homeroom and look out the window when he was in 10th grade, he saw that there was a big Van Heusen shirt billboard across the street from the high school, I guess up on the top of a building. It's probably where Route 81 is now. And that's what inspired him, inspired the name change. It was this billboard that was up there. He went to Cazenovia, what was then Cazenovia Seminary. That's before it became an all-girls school, which before it became the school it became today. And then on to Syracuse University. One of his closest friends in college was a guy named Jerry Arlen. Not real important. However, Jerry Arlen's brother, Harold Arlen, amazingly important. I could have done Harold Arlen. Harold Arlen wrote the entire score for the show, or for the movie The Wizard of Oz. And of course, he won the award, the Academy Award for Best Song in a movie, which was, of course, Over the Rainbow. So Harold Arlen liked Jimmy Van Heusen, and he promoted his music. And here's a picture, and I want you to think about this picture. Well, it's fine. If you look up, go to Frank Sinatra images, through Google, you'll find a zillion pictures of Frank Sinatra, and in 90% of them he has a hat on. So when we had the picture before this, I understand why, in fact, he always wore a hat, because he had this very large bald spot. There you go. Right back there with kind of a funny little comb over on it, and I guess that was a big deal back then. So Sinatra, you almost always see Sinatra until later in his life. You almost always see him in a hat. Okay, this was well, almost. In 1953, and I can just tell you this, Bing Crosby provided the financial backing for a new show, and he wanted Harold Arlen to write it after all the success he had with The Wizard of Oz. But Harold Arlen looked at it and said, yeah, I don't think I want to be tied to this one. So the commission then was passed down to Jimmy Van Heusen and Johnny Burke, and the show was called Carnival in Flanders. It opened on Broadway September 8th of 1953, and it closed just 6 shows later as one of Broadway's biggest flops. However, out of this show came an amazing song. It's only 16 measures long. It's a very short song, and it's called "Here's That Rainy Day." It's not a song that comes to everybody's mind. It's not a song that we had a long discussion about ending a program with this song, and I thought about it because it's not a big stomp your foot kind of piece. Johnny Carson, who hosted the Tonight Show for 30 years, when he was asked what his favorite song ever was, it was either "I'll Be Seeing You," written by Sam McFane back in the 30s, or "Here's That Rainy Day," written by Jimmy Van Heusen. And I can remember on Carson's next to last show, his last show, May 22nd of 1992, sounds like a long time ago, doesn't it? 92. His last show, it was just a compilation of old bits and old things that had gone on. But his next to last show he had guests on, and I think that there was a whole generation of people, including myself and my parents, who watched Carson religiously every night. Watched the news till 11:30, put on Carson and watch whatever amount of that. And I see some people nodding, saying, yeah, that's what it was in our household. And on his last show, he had Bette Midler come on, and they sat at the desk, and they sang this song to each other. And I turned around, and I saw both my mom and dad, and it was the last show, and the tears were streaming down their face and all that stuff. It was a real special evening. So this is Jimmy Van Heusen's "Here's That Rainy Day." It's in his night.
I should have said
someday I'll look, you could do a thesis on any one of these people. I want to introduce my other wonderful, long time friend. We met, if you remember, Ann, at a Rotary pancake breakfast on election day. Ann Habermel from Portland. She is the proprietor of the Harp and Dragon, which is a shop that sells things Celtic and harps. She ships harps all over the planet from Portland. Thank you very much. I'm sure, as everyone knows, there's refreshments in the back. There's at least 4 kinds of pies this year, as well as beverages.